When you ask questions and you are given answers, sometimes the answers you are given actually create more questions. That's where this particular question came from. After my last video, when I asked the question, is there no legal process in Nigeria for adoption? Because when I heard that video, it sounded dodgy, man, and so, I don't know if my mind thinks content creation too much, that I just thought, let me go and consult. Let me go check. Let me look around. You can find some of these laws that kind of put out the processes that are that are required to following if you're going to adopt a child. And I thought maybe in this case I might also have a right thought. Let me go down the memory lane or a documentation lane to see, is there a certain process that is followed in Nigeria for adoption. And that's where this video idea came from. And I'm going to show you what I saw, what becomes questionable even more of the video that they released, supposedly claiming that she is not the daughter of TB Joshua, she's adopted. Now, no problem. If she's adopted, was the adoption that they are claiming legal, according to as it's stated in that video? That's the question we're going to be asking. It's the Rich Reality Show with the daily Christian commentary videos. If it's the first time over here, be sure to check out some of the videos that are down in the pinned comments, and I'm going to check you out over there. Process. Was it a legal process? Now, in the previous video, I just asked the question in passing. I asked the question in sense of, this doesn't sound like the process that I know to be followed by agencies which are actually required to follow up on it. And so I came across a particular document called the Child's Act of 2003 in comparison to the 1973 version. Now, I'm going to do a couple of quotations from this document that tells you the process of what happens when a child gets abandoned. Like if you find a child abandoned, what to do. Now remember, according to the story that the Squan, the story that the Squan would have us believe over them, with them claiming that their sole perpetuary or idea on how adoption is done. Now, I'm gonna go back to showing you something here. There is this article that I found showing there is 6 steps necessary to making an adoption of a child in Nigeria. 6-step process. And you'll be it's quite interesting. Now, this might have a little bit of legal talk. And so if a lawyer is there, understands it better, you can highlight it for us, and we have better explanation for what's going on or what we are seeing inside this particular document. Now, when you actually read what's been said here, it says that there is a step process, and they actually give an example of a case where a child was being sold to give an example of what they are trying to prevent. So there's something to prevent in the safety interest of the child, which is why these processes are necessary. Okay, that being stated, one of those that I noted was the steps that are spoken about here. The pre-approval from state welfare agency. So they must either say whether you've met the criteria for adoption and so forth and all that entire jazz. You can't just go over there, pick up a child and then be gone. That was the question that I had in the last video. I can't just go pick up a child. They must see if the place is fit for a child and so forth. And SCOAN being a church, they might approve a church having its house for adoption, but for them to in the same, I don't know. I don't know. Like I said, I'm not a lawyer in that particular space, right? I'm just a person reading these documents and finding them quite interesting. By the way, this was an interesting read. I didn't have too much time to read the entire thing, but as much as I read on the questions I had, it left me with more questions. So for instance, they say the pre-approval, so the state agency must approve the court application, so the person who is seeking an adoption apply, and then you come to step number 3, investigation on state welfare by state welfare agency. Now, in this particular thing, it does also add this idea of the police version of investigation or investigating the situation with relevant agencies or relevant officials in order to determine the placement of a child, and then also a court order, which is necessary, and then final documentation of where the child is, placement of the child, all that entire process. So this particular portion here of article kind of generated my interest more into that act, that 2003 act that I was speaking about just in a sentence. Was I breaking English? That I was spoken. Forget my breaking of English. Let's get back to this particular article. Now, one of the points that they mentioned, someone would say, Hariki, the child was placed there and so forth, and there's a time that limit and stuff. We went through that. In this document, actually, as a matter of fact, they do highlight a certain scenario here. They give a scenario where they say no child may be kept by police protection for more than 72 hours. Okay, that's the thing. Now, if that's the case, they then go to list out what is necessary to be done, and you actually find that in this document over here. In this particular portion of the document, they state what is necessary if the child has been kept by the agency for too long. Okay, they say as soon as reasonably practiced, after taking the child into police protection, the section 3 over there. Okay, they say the police officer concerned shall take such steps. So there are certain steps that the child must take. Go to on the government state agencies that are necessary for that accommodation, considering accommodation. So there is a process of elimination of choices for the police officers while they do their investigation before talking about placement. But if you go back there, they then list out some of these things. Okay, consider the parent of the child, consider where the child might have come from. Did she come from a hospital? They give birth to a hospital, investigate that particular aspect of things. A person who thought, though not being a parent, may have parental responsibility. And then it goes to say that any other person to whom the child is living immediately before taken into to things. So if the child was in police custody, they are going to be brought in to be considered and so forth. But that is after the 72-hour entire process. So question, was there a follow-up on documentation? Because remember, when a police makes a decision, there needs to be documentation for that decision. And that's not me just talking fluff. Okay, that's not just me talking fluff. If you read the C section there, it says any other person who's considered as a number 4. It says a police officer designated under subsection 3C of this section shall or complete an inquiry under that subsection, release the child from police protection unless he considers for the well-being of the child and the whole 9 quarters. But they release the child after doing an inquiry. So which means there would be a document that shows, remember, the police, they write a report so that if the case is handed over to another police, they will be able to follow up on the steps necessary. Because you actually get to that in this particular reading. When you actually read through this entire thing, notice there it says that just a second, I think it's actually in this I want to just confirm which section that is, where it talks about the necessary steps that are actually taken and the police officer actually stating out those particular steps that they actually decide to take. And so I think it's this particular section right here. Right. In section number C there, it says that inform the child if the person is of age to understand of the steps that are being taken in respect of him under this section and of the reason for the steps to be taken. Okay, so if we don't have a current placement for the child, the steps should be listed out after the police officer has done an inquiry and then confirmed with the relevant authorities and so forth about the placement of the child. So that's why I'm asking this question. Was the supposed adoption that they're talking about at Squam a legal version? Because if Ajoke is not the child of Joshua, was the legal process followed in order to make sure that the church was the place to place the child? That's an interesting one. That's an interesting one. And if there was a government organization involved, they could kind of confirm which agency that is, right? You have to kind of document, like I stated, these things will be stated so that if a case is taken on to a certain investigation officer, he's able to follow down with the steps that was, like it states there, the necessary steps and why those particular steps are being taken. Okay? If you actually look even at the earlier part, taking such steps, okay, section B over there above, taking such steps are reasonable to preventing the child from being removed from a hospital or a place which the child has been accommodated, such as reasonable, practicable after taking a child. I might be reading fluff. After taking the child into child protection, these are the particular steps that they should do. Actually, inform the government state agency on section B on number 2 there, point number A. Okay, inform the state government within whom the child was thinking. So if a child is found under a certain jurisdiction, inform that agency in order for the steps be followed. Okay, you put the child here, the officers know. You put the child here, the relevant authorities know. You put the child here so that they are informed of all the steps. That's why I'm asking. The version that TB Joshua mentions in that video, is it a legal process? Because he says they took the child in and then the officers just say, oh yeah, why don't you just keep the child? If according to these steps, there is 6 steps by which one must follow for adoption, was Ajoke adopted legally? Because now you are implying other things now. It's either, don't forget, this is a huge problem in Africa. It's a huge problem in Africa. When Ajoke now comes out claiming that all kinds of things, mandems happened, and she has witnesses, it creates problems. Was the adoption that they are claiming? And now, as we had settled with, it's still Joshua's daughter. We are settled with that. We're like, unfortunately, he didn't get to repent, state that, yes, this is his child. So as we were fine with that. But now, if you are saying she's adopted, was the legal process followed? Because if the legal process was not followed, then BBC was asking the right question. You can't just take a child and then show us an affidavit. There will be an entire legal process that is followed. There would be a court document that shows that. As we stated there will be a court document. There would be relevant agencies, welfare agencies that would have confirmed it. There would be final documentation that shows that, not an affidavit. There would be entire documentation to show that you were the right person. Now, do remember that it does say there, okay, that they will have to consider the previous accommodation that the child had. Okay, if you actually see in C section, and others who the child was living immediately before being placed under child protection. So those that are thinking, they might be part of thinking, was it just temporary placement? And if it was just temporal placement, she was there for how many years before she was actually released? And was it, which organization authorized this? Which organization? We are very interested in knowing the person who signed that affidavit. Who was it? Let us see that document. Because you will have to keep, Bazalan, this is not documents you will just throw into the dustbin. This is documents that you will have to keep. It's like it's a birth certificate. You will keep it to say, this child came here. This is the organization. This is the court's right of parental rights that we got. The whole thing. There is an entire process, man. So the version that's spoken there, those that are lawyers can tell us. Because right now we just have people, a lot of ignorant people, ignoring the red flags in the video. They're ignoring all the aspects of wrong version of parental thing. If you are the one who's placed to parent over this child, and you are using that type of version of discipline, that was wrong. There's so many problems with that video. If only people understood. There's so many problems. There is no agency, because now we'll have to have questions. Because in most adoption, more questions. In most adoption cases, what happens is that those relevant organizations that are appointing for kids to be adopted must go back and do a follow-up. They must do follow-up visits. They must check up on the welfare of the child to make sure that the child is, those type of things. What are you saying? You are undermining if the child was adopted, was the version that's been spoken about a legal process of adoption? Because if the child is subjected to what we saw in that video in order for discipline, it was completely wrong. It doesn't build the child. It is not, that's humiliation. That is nothing to do with things. The child does wrong. You are there blasting them. Yeah, she stole. You are recording that. Shameful. You people are shameful. All of you. Yes. Let me tell you now so that when you get there, so that when you stand before the Messiah, you know exactly. It's shameful. It's shameful. That video is your version. That video is a red flag. It says the child was not in a place where adoption. Are you sure it's adoption? Are you sure? We were fine with parent. You are sure with adoption? It's Ricky. We're done.